The fire trucks tore down the street, sirens wailing and lights flashing like a storm of chaos, only to grind to a halt. Not because they'd reached the blazing diner on Elm Street, but because their backup power relay had failed. Hydrants sputtered, pressure flatlined, and the station's grid went dark. Radio chatter erupted in panic, all tracing back to one spot: not a fried transformer or a downed substation, but a single suburban driveway. Hours earlier, Patricia, the HOA vice president and self-appointed neighborhood overlord, had stormed up to my charging station, ripped out the heavy-duty cable, and flung it across the lawn like she was exorcising a curse. Her words still echoed. "This junk doesn't belong here. Want to play with your gadgets? Move to a tech commune." She strutted off, heels clicking like a gavel, oblivious to the fact that she'd just severed the fire department's emergency backup grid. That cable wasn't just for my electric car, it was part of a city-permitted, grant-funded solar inverter system that kept Fire Station 3's batteries charged for crises. And that night, it was the only thing standing between a small fire and a neighborhood catastrophe. It started that morning, serene to the point of mockery. Birds sang, my dog Rusty sprawled on the grass like a lazy tenant, and I'd just finished tweaking the diagnostic panel on my home grid relay. As an energy systems consultant for the city's emergency infrastructure team, I took pride in keeping critical systems humming, especially the ones nobody noticed. My home was part of a discrete backup grid supporting nearby emergency services. My EV charger wasn't just a plug, it was a high-capacity relay linked to a solar buffer I designed and installed myself. That buffer fed clean power through an underground conduit to Fire Station 3, 2 blocks away. It wasn't glamorous, but it was vital. Then came the telltale clack of Patricia's heels, announcing her approach like a war drum. She marched up my driveway, clutching a laminated HOA rulebook and a latte, her face set in that smug, passive-aggressive smirk. I braced for one of her infamous lectures. She didn't disappoint. She started with a spiel about neighborhood aesthetics and community standards, then zeroed in on my charger, calling it an eyesore that violated a supposed HOA ban on unapproved outdoor tech. I raised an eyebrow. No such vote had happened, and my neighbors confirmed it. But Patricia wasn't one for facts when her mind was made up. I explained that the system was HOA approved 2 years ago and registered with the city for emergency energy support, offering to show permits. Her response was a line that would haunt her. Nobody wants to live next to a power plant. This isn't a factory, it's a community. Before I could stop her, she grabbed the cable clearly marked with a warning sticker and yanked it free. The magnetic seal popped, relays clicked off, and the system went dead. For a moment, we stood frozen, her looking triumphant, me dumbfounded. That cable wasn't just for my car, it powered a transfer switch under the driveway, feeding the fire station's backup inverters. Without it, the station's batteries were capped at local capacity, useless in a major outage. I tried to explain, pointing to the city tag on the charger, but she scoffed. "Stop with your tech fairy tales. Plug it back in like a normal person and quit acting like you're running a space station." Rebooting wasn't a simple flip of a switch. Safety protocols demanded a manual reset, meaning the grid link was down until I could run the sequence. Patricia hadn't just been redeshed endangered lives with the smugness of someone scolding a kid for a messy yard. I reported it to the HOA, though I knew it was pointless. Patricia ran the show, while the president, a spineless retiree named Harold, nodded along to avoid her wrath. She'd already strong-armed neighbors into repainting fences and once threatened to fine a veteran for a weathered flag. This was new, though her meddling had gone from petty to perilous. That night, as I worked on the reset in my garage, red lights flashed across the ceiling. I stepped outside to find a fire chief's SUV in my driveway. Chief Ramirez, in full gear, looked grim. An equipment test had revealed the station's backup power failure, traced to my address. I laid out the situation: the solar buffer, the city permits, Patricia's sabotage. He nodded, jaw tight. Then, as if on cue, Patricia burst from her house across the street, drawn by the lights like a moth to a flame. She charged up, yelling at Ramirez to stop trespassing, claiming the city couldn't audit private citizens. When he tried to explain, she pulled out her phone and called 911, accusing him of impersonating an officer. I watched, stunned, as she tried to have the fire chief arrested on his own call. Dispatch sent a patrol car, and the officer, recognizing Ramirez, spent 15 minutes calming her down. Before storming off, she hissed at me. If your house wasn't a tech dump, none of this would have happened. Ramirez, exhausted, said he'd never had to prove his identity during a grid failure caused by a neighborhood vigilante. He warned that if the backup wasn't restored soon, someone would answer for it. I didn't sleep, not out of fear of Patricia, but because I sensed the storm brewing. The next morning, a rusted van with Mike's Home Repairs stenciled on the side parked half on my lawn. Out stepped Patricia's cousin, Mike, a shady handyman who'd once tried to scam me with a fake warranty at a block party. He had my charger like it was alien tech, toolbox in hand. Patricia sent me to fix this, he said. Says you're messing with the grid. I asked if he was licensed for high-capacity relays. He chuckled. Power's power, man. I wired my buddy's shed with a car battery. Before I could stop him, he touched the panel. Sparks flew, the system hissed, and Mike yelped. Is this thing booby-trapped? I warned him it was a municipal grid link. Tampering could trigger a security response. He shrugged. Patricia says it's gotta go, or the HOA will sue you. I started recording as he yanked wires like they were Christmas lights. A loop caught an underground conduit, and a fuse blew with a puff of smoke. Mike dropped the cable, cursing. I shut down the secondary breaker, but the damage was done. Patricia rolled up in her SUV, tracksuit pristine, and berated me, claiming I'd installed illegal equipment. She waved a dog-eared HOA manual from 2010, pointing to a vague rule about visible electrical structures. I asked if she'd sue the fire department, too, since they co-signed the permits. She ignored me, directing Mike, whose hand was now blistered from the sparks. Neighbors gathered, some filming. Then the HOA dropped a bombshell, a $10,000 fine for non-compliant infrastructure, citing safety hazards and unapproved equipment despite my documented permits. They threatened escalating penalties and eviction. It felt like a dystopian shakedown. I forwarded the notice to my lawyer, the city energy department, and Chief Ramirez. The fire department responded within hours, furious, requesting diagnostics and any footage. That sparked an idea. I launched my drone, sweeping over the neighborhood, including Patricia's property. She often stashed HOA materials in her garage, treating it like her command center. Through a window gap, I spotted coiled copper wire, a cut conduit, and my stolen panel faceplate. Mike's van sat nearby, loaded with burnt fuses and what looked like my charger's parts. I compiled the footage, time-stamped with audio, and sent it to the fire department, power company, and county zoning office. By dusk, I had confirmations. An investigation was underway. The power company's grid resilience team warned that the sabotage had cut 30% of backup capacity, leaving the fire station, a hospital, and hundreds of homes vulnerable. Patricia had no idea the dominoes she'd toppled. The reckoning came at 3:17 a.m. A storm roared through, wind howling, rain pounding. A transformer blew, plunging the neighborhood into darkness. My phone buzzed. Grid failure, Zone 3. Backup response offline. That zone included the fire station, a veterans care facility, and flood-prone streets. Patricia's sabotage had left us defenseless. I grabbed my toolkit and ran through the downpour to the garage. The main charger was still compromised, so I knelt in freezing runoff to access the backup node. The panel blinked red dead battery, severed conduit. I bypassed the warning, bridging a temporary circuit. A green light flickered. Partial power reached the station's critical systems. But the full grid needed a reboot at the utility shed 2 blocks away. I sprinted through the storm, flashlight bouncing. At the corner, I saw firefighters battling a house fire lightning had struck. A hydrant trickled weakly. Without the relay, water boosters were offline. Flames climbed the roof as neighbors watched in horror. I reached the shed, swiped my city badge, and flipped the bypass switch. The grid coughed, then surged. Water pressure roared back, and the fire crew gained control. Soaked and shaking, I realized how close we'd come to disaster. Morning revealed a battered neighborhood debris everywhere, the burned house a grim reminder. Patricia, oblivious, emerged with a yoga mat and tea, stretching like nothing had happened. But at noon, a city SUV parked at her house. 2 officials in high-vis jackets demanded to inspect her garage. She refused, citing harassment, but they presented a warrant, backed by emergency powers post-storm. A cop, armed with Mike's master code, opened the garage. Inside, my stolen cable, melted panel, scavenged copper, and old HOA wiring. An official held up a charred coil. This could have burned the block. Patricia blamed Mike, but neighbor footage showed her hauling the parts herself. At an emergency town hall, I presented my evidence: blueprints, logs, drone footage, and the fire department's report on the near catastrophe. Patricia countered with blog printouts about radiation risks, claiming she was protecting kids. The crowd erupted. A mother shouted, "My son's oxygen machine failed because of you." An elderly man roared, "You nearly torched us all." Harold, the HOA president, finally stood, announcing Patricia's removal as vice president for misconduct and endangerment. She was banned from future HOA roles and faced legal review. She left the meeting in silence, the crowd parting like she was a ghost. Days later, a DHS van rolled up, flanked by FEMA and city officials. My system, they revealed, was a federal redundancy node, critical to 800 homes, emergency routes, and a hospital. Patricia's sabotage had triggered a national security alert. Agents inspected my setup, treating it like a crime scene. Across the street, investigators entered Patricia's home, seizing phones, laptops, and components. Mike, arriving in a beat-up truck, was detained after a brief exchange. Patricia was escorted to a vehicle, not arrested but clearly cornered. The neighborhood watched, stunned. Repairs took days, upgrading my system with hardened casing, tamper sensors, and triple redundancy. My name was etched on the control panel: Node 3C, Author J. Carter. At a city hall meeting, I was offered a role advising the grid modernization project. Patricia's HOA was dissolved, her misappropriated funds probed. Mike's plea deal exposed their tampering with other neighbors' system solar panels, medical fridges, all for beautification. Her house, slapped with liens, sat empty, a default notice taped to the window. She left in a rented car, ignored by all. A letter from Patricia arrived weeks later, a cursive rant blaming everyone but herself, ending with a plea for a character reference to reduce her community service. I forwarded it to the city and filed it away. The HOA, under new leadership, redirected Patricia's slush fund to community batteries and solar lights. My charger now powers the fire station, medkits, and school lighting. I framed the scorched cable, hanging it with a plaque: pulled by ego, rewired by duty. Patricia tried to unplug us, but she sparked a stronger, brighter community, one she'll never control again.